All 9 Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee calling for Congressman Adam Schiff to resign as chairman of the committee in the wake of the Mueller report. They accused the California Democrat of misleading the public by citing evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, even after the report cleared the president of such a charge. Joining me right now is Fox News contributor Trey Gowdy. He is a former Republican congressman from South Carolina, and he is the former chairman of the House Oversight Committee. He is also a former federal prosecutor. And Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, assess that. I mean, have you ever seen anything like that? 9 Republicans are asking the chairman to step down. What is your reaction to Adam Schiff's behavior?
Never seen that before. We had a lot of bad days the 8 years I was in Congress, but we never voted to remove or ask a chairperson to step down. Adam is a deeply partisan person. He did everything he could to make sure that Hillary Clinton became the next president, and he's done everything he could since he failed at that to keep a cloud over the Trump presidency. So the folks on the House Intelligence Committee on the Republican side, Maria, are not members of the crazy caucus. They're not bomb throwers. It's Elise Stefanik. It's Will Hurd, who was a CIA employee. It's Johnny Ratcliffe, who was a terrorism prosecutor. It's not part of the crazy caucus. These are reasonable Republicans, all of whom unanimously said, Adam, we've lost confidence in your ability to lead. And I think the next thing that's going to happen is the different intelligence communities, the different intelligence entities are going to say, you know what, Chairman Schiff, if you don't believe the information we provide to you, if you prejudge the outcome of investigations, if you have the President of the United States not just indicted but in jail, and you continue to leak like a screen door on a submarine, we're going to quit giving you information. That's when Pelosi will replace Adam Schiff with someone like Jim Himes, who's every bit as progressive. He's just a lot smarter and a lot more reasonable.
Well, you make a lot of good points, because here's a guy who's running around with his title and spewing out things that are actually coloring people's knowledge of what actually went down. You questioned John Brennan. Same story here. He's a former director of the CIA. So when you hear that title, you see that resume, you stop and you listen. And yet it was back in May of 2017 when you poked holes in his idea that the president had committed treason. He used that word on CNN many times. Here's that exchange between you and Brennan last year.
It's a really simple question. Did evidence exist of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors at the time you learned of 2016 efforts?
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals, and it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals. I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed. I don't know. But I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
Sufficient basis? And let me correct myself, that was 2 years ago. 2 years ago you poked holes in this narrative. How did this happen, Congressman? So how do you launch a major investigation into a candidate who's running for president based on no predicate?
Well, let me first note, Maria, that was a Republican asking a question about collusion, because you would never know that if you read the Washington Post and the New York Times. They wanted you to believe that Republicans didn't care about collusion. That was a Republican on national television asking about collusion. It began because of a guy named Peter Strzok with his historic animus towards Trump in July of 2016, launching a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. This is about 10 days before he talked about an insurance policy. It was after he said Clinton should win $100 million to nothing. It was after he said Trump would be destabilizing for our country. It was just before he said he had no interest in being part of the special counsel unless it led to impeachment. That's the guy who started the counterintelligence investigation into President Trump. But that's the same investigation that a lot of my Republican colleagues now want you to read the report. It was a flawed ab initio from its inception investigation, and now some of my Republican colleagues want you to read a report on a flawed ab initio investigation.
Trey, you said a minute ago this was based on a faulty investigation from the start. What about the AG releasing the full Mueller report? Where are you on that?
Maria, I bifurcate the investigation and therefore the report. Part of it is what did Russia do in 2016? I am all for my fellow citizens understanding what Russia tried to do to this country. I think it'll be unifying. The other part of the equation is with whom, if anyone, did they do it? And Mueller, you know, Adam and Swalwell and Beto, they all talk about evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what it takes to convict. Mueller didn't even find the lowest level of evidence that anyone in the Trump campaign did it with Russia. There's not even probable cause. So I realize the populist thing to do is say release it all, which, by the way, is against the law. You can't release it all. Let's assume you can just release what you can that's not classified. We are now in the uncharted territory of releasing reports on people for whom there is not even the lowest level of evidentiary standard, not even probable cause. And once you begin to go down that path where you're going to issue reports and do press conferences on people who are not indicted, for whom there's no evidence they committed a crime, then we're in a brand new day politically when the department can do oppo research on a campaign and then under the guise of a report release it but never charge them. I hope we never get to that point, and that's why I'm in a very small minority that doesn't think that part of the report should be made public. I realize I'm in the minority, but I'm not a populist.
Yeah, I noticed that John Ratcliffe took a little walk when the vote came, so he also agrees don't release it because it's not right, and for all the reasons you just mentioned. Look, as I think about this, I feel like this whole thing started by the Clinton machine. Hillary Clinton wanted dirt on Donald Trump. She paid for the dossier. They protected her for her own investigation. It's just extraordinary where we are as we look back. Congressman, it is good to see you this morning. Thank you. Here now, Trey Gowdy, former House Oversight Committee Chairman and Fox News contributor. Good to have you in New York.
Yes,
Mr. Gowdy, thank you very much for being here. So, you know, your reaction to the missing of this deadline, and Jerry Nadler also has said, the chairman has said that they're asking him to break his constitutional obligation. And before you answer, I want to sneak in that sound. Let's watch that.
We need these materials to fulfill our constitutional obligations. Period. Our chief constitutional obligation is to hold the president accountable, especially in an instance where the Department of Justice says it cannot hold the president accountable. Those judgments must be made by Congress, not by a political appointee, the Attorney General.
What do you think about that?
I think he's right in this limited regard. It is Congress's responsibility to investigate malfeasance by the president. So Nadler, go right ahead. Mueller interviewed 500 witnesses. Jerry, go ahead and start. But the executive branch does not have to produce its work product so Congress can then use it against the executive branch. This subpoena deadline, I'll be surprised if Barr ever produces everything. And they can go to court, but they will lose in court. What you saw today is for a public consumption. It's a communications war. It's not a constitutional war. That's clear. The executive branch does not have to comply with arbitrary deadlines set by a co-equal branch.
All right. So tonight, one of the big questions has been whether or not the letter that we saw from Attorney General Barr accurately represented the principal conclusions in the Mueller report. And I think that, you know, most of us have assumed, since we know that we've heard that Mr. Mueller has been kind of integral in that process, as had Rod Rosenstein, the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General. But there's a piece out tonight that just crossed moments ago on the New York Times, which says that some of the investigators on the team, on Mueller's team, feel that the portrayal of the president is more positive than they felt in terms of the findings from all of their work over the past couple of years. What do you make of that?
Not at all surprising. You have 40 agents and almost 20 lawyers. I'd be shocked if they all were of unanimous opinion. Remember, with the Clinton email, Jim Baker disagreed with Jim Comey. He believed up until the very end that they had a case that was prosecutable. So I'm not at all surprised by that. The only thing that matters is whether or not you had sufficient probable cause to criminally charge someone. Whether you had some bad acts, some misbehavior. The good thing about the criminal justice system is we have standards. It's beyond a reasonable doubt to get a conviction, but it's probable cause to charge someone. And if you don't have probable cause, how close you came to it is irrelevant.
All right. So full transparency, you feel that if those arguing in favor of full transparency really mean that, they are also going to want to produce a whole lot of other documents that explain another part of this story.
Well, those arguing in favor of full transparency will not be satisfied with the Mueller report. They will want to see the transcripts from the grand jury interviews. They'll want to see the underlying data. I mean, this same game that's being played now, which is we don't believe Barr's summary, they're going to say we don't believe Mueller's report. We want to read these witness interviews for ourselves. So you're then in a position of relitigating the Department of Justice's decision not to charge someone. And if we open that door, if we begin to go down the path where you can investigate but there's not enough evidence to charge, and then be required to turn over all the incriminating evidence you found, then I don't know why we have any evidentiary standards
Plus,
left.
I mean, the process just goes around and around, because the process is that Congress has the right to investigate, to look into it, but they can't charge anyone. What they can do is sort of make a recommendation to charge, and then it would go back to the DOJ, who's already handled it and handed it off to a special counsel for 2 years, correct?
Or they can impeach.
Or they can impeach.
And if Adam Schiff is really concerned about collusion, the collusion that he hasn't been able to identify for the last 2 years, then he can have his own. I mean, Congress has a lot of power. Bring in the same 500 witnesses that Mueller interviewed, but don't take somebody else's work and then second guess it, micromanage it, and pick and choose parts of it you like and don't like to try to use it for political purposes. Hey, Congress, you're a co-equal branch. Go do your own investigation.
All right, before I let you go, I got to ask you one question about a story that we did last night with regard to the security breach at Mar-a-Lago. Does it concern you that the president's other home is also, you know, a public place where people come and go? I mean, that's got to be a nightmare for the Secret Service, I would imagine.
I'm sure it is. I was there 2 weeks ago. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of law enforcement. I thought they did a phenomenal job. It's really hard when you have a president who likes to interact with people to keep him safe. I was stunned at how tight the security was when I was there, and in terms of secrets staying there, no one has reported how badly Lindsey Graham and Mick Mulvaney lost in golf to being the president. So that secret has remained.
I think you heard it first, though, tonight, folks. Lindsey Graham and Mick Mulvaney will be giving you a call after this. Thank you very much,
Yes,
Trey Gowdy. Good to see you tonight.
Yes, ma'am.